Welcome to the International Straight Talk video series on the big emerging markets of the 1990s and beyond.
And from the perspective of 5,000 years. But if you build in patience for yourself, if you build it into your business plan from the very beginning, if you build it into your schedules and the agendas for your trips and meetings, then you'll be able to incorporate that patience and use it as a strategic tool. You can do this by enabling your Chinese counterparts to discover that they can consider your offer or your position in a long-term context, which may be completely different than the short-term context they thought they were going to deal with coming into negotiations with you. And they'll discover you're very different from the person they thought you were. Don't discount the potential advantage of allowing your Chinese counterparts to discover such things about you and your proposal or plan or position.
I think American business people, when they go to China, they at a status of they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what they are lacking of. They don't know what they are looking for. They don't know what is guanxi. How do I build it? How really guanxi works? So I think consultant, some people who understand Chinese culture very well, who understand how the Chinese people do their business and how do they think, and also who can communicate with you well and who can understand your business. They can tell you a lot about China.
Experienced American negotiators also report that having clear goals, maintaining control of the agenda, and having at least one fluent Mandarin speaker on the team can be important keys to success. Other findings in the negotiation research literature are that small group meetings often yield better results than larger meetings, and these can often be organized by suggesting an informal discussion just to explore ideas. You'll find that building in time for these informal discussions, beginning with a second trip that you make to China, can yield impressive results compared to trying to force things through strictly business channels. Second, if you're running the business and aren't directly involved with ongoing negotiations with Chinese counterparts, organizations, and individuals, you should maintain direct, open communications with the people who are affecting your business directly, rather than assuming that their negotiators are doing a sufficient job of communicating to them. Don't reveal too much information prior to reaching secure agreements with the Chinese. However, do understand that the Chinese desire for information creates a real opportunity for American businesses to provide information of collateral value to potential Chinese partners without jeopardizing core business. American negotiators also advise that you not rely exclusively on your potential partners' assertions concerning how big the market is and where it lies, but check such information out systematically. Again, your International Small Business Development Center can be of great help in this area.
One of the things that inevitably American businessmen get wrapped up in when you go into a place like China is everybody's got a cousin, a friend, a brother, an uncle, or a distant relative who's a miracle worker. And that miracle worker is going to make it possible to do great things in the Magic Kingdom. Well, generally you need to be suspicious of the miracle workers because the fact of the matter is it's a bureaucratic system. There are rules. They need to be satisfied. And you have to accept the fact that it's going to be very, very difficult to entirely circumvent these rules. And in fact, it's actually at the point when you look at the American business interest in China today that there's almost a cottage industry that has grown up where these miracle workers are available, always, of course, for an upfront fee. So word of caution on that one. really approach miracle workers with some skepticism. And if they are that great, of course, they ought to be able to give you a list of solid references who can extol their virtues and how valuable their service was.
There are some traditional Chinese negotiating approaches that can frustrate even well-prepared American business people. One of the main frustrations we run into is that while Americans tend to enter negotiations with one goal, which is to bargain to agreement and then to close the bargaining process, Chinese typically see bargaining from several different perspectives, only one of which has reaching agreement as a primary goal. In other words, reaching agreement is only one of several goals and may not even be the highest priority goal for Chinese negotiators opposite you. Other important perspectives that the Chinese carry into negotiations can include information seeking, making preliminary investigations for what will turn out to be a very long-term plan, and serving as a front for Chinese market research and planning. The process of negotiating is complicated by the consultative nature of Chinese decision-making, since individual negotiators typically don't make decisions at the table, further extending the time requirements for achieving your goals. Lucian Pye, whose writings on China are always useful for serious business people, points out that Chinese use what he calls vivid hierarchies and categories in buyer-seller negotiations. This means that if you're a seller, your company's prominence, reputation, technological position, and industry position are all vividly prominent in the minds of any prospective Chinese buyer. Unless you can create the perception that your company is somehow the best or number one in your field, or unless you can establish in some way that you're at the top of an important hierarchy, the Chinese will probably want to demand major concessions in return for their willingness to deal with someone who's so far down on the totem pole. Now, don't think this means that you have to have a national image or market presence in the U.S. A strong local or regional presence will do just fine as long as it's properly presented to the Chinese. Now, here's another area where the free or low-cost advice and assistance available from your International Small Business Development Center can translate into competitive advantage for you in the Chinese market. Lucian Pye also notes that Chinese typically search for mutual interests rather than for compromise points during negotiations, and don't feel a need to dominate agreements once their own needs are satisfied. He points out that this is because Chinese culture teaches that there can be as many advantages to taking a dependent role as there are to establishing a dominant one. Chinese negotiators frequently seek to establish general principles like friendship and cooperation up front, which many Americans think of as merely rhetoric and tend to agree to while trying to shift the discussion to specifics, only to discover later that transactions are being governed by those innocent statements of principle up front. Be very cautious in publicly or formally agreeing to general principles which are, in your American mind, non-specific enough that they can't possibly represent a commitment. In practical terms, let's say you're at a ceremony or a banquet, exchanging toasts with prospective Chinese associates. The senior Chinese at the banquet raises his glass and calls for a relationship to be governed by principles of friendship, mutual trust, and a spirit of cooperation. Well, as the senior American present from your company, you raise your glass and agree that the business relationship between you should be one of trust, cooperation, and openness. Many Americans consider words spoken on formal ceremonial occasions like this to be just so much window dressing. However, in China, they serve an entirely different purpose. And as our senior American toaster in this example, you may soon find yourself under full court press to give concessions or to hand over key technology in the name of your publicly avowed friendship, trust, and cooperation. Naturally, if you resist whatever proposal is being made, you're going to be quickly reminded that your resistance is inconsistent with a spirit of friendship, trust, and cooperation which you yourself stated was the guiding principle. Do you get the picture? Toasts and public statements are critically important in China and are an important opportunity, by the way, for you to program a relationship with solid underlying principles. Just be very careful how you phrase public statements, because it's common to find them recorded and played back to you as commitments. Perhaps the best piece of advice on toasts is, do not go to China without thinking through your public statements, such as toasts, in advance. Use both tactical and strategic vision to examine your intended statements. And don't forget, the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service has good, solid people on the ground in China's major cities who can consult with you on the phrasing of your public statements and can help point out possible traps and pitfalls.
The Chinese banquet is a very important business event. It's not just a social event, it's a business function, and you need to treat it as such. And you need to prepare yourself before you go. Your delegation needs to go together, enter the room as one group, and you should prepare in advance, especially for the toast. You need to, it's an important opportunity to express in a formal way and to the group as a whole your sentiments and your feelings about the relationship that you're building, the goodwill that you're building, and your wish for success for the future venture.
Quite frankly, the Chinese tend to use negotiations as a front for information gathering. So, when offering quality information, especially when you're doing it for free, be sure to treat it as very valuable, and be sure to make access to more valuable information conditional in ways that not only benefit you, but can benefit the Chinese. Keep clearly in mind that everything from the mundane to the crucial is negotiated in China. So your understanding of traditional Chinese tactics and strategies will determine your everyday effectiveness as well as your overall success in business. Along these lines, a few final thoughts on the subject occur to me. First, it's an excellent idea to enter into negotiations with at least one other country in Asia before you enter into your initial negotiations with China. It may be double the initial effort, but it can pay off in real strategic advantages. In the simplest possible terms, having your new Chinese acquaintances know that you're stopping in Delhi or Bangkok after leaving Beijing or Shanghai for a week of visiting with potential Indian or Thai or even overseas Chinese rivals for your business can help to spur events in China itself in ways you might not think possible. Another piece of excellent, important advice is to plan from the beginning to keep your negotiation or business development team together for a minimum of several years. Don't change horses in midstream with Chinese counterpart organizations. It's very important you assure to the extent possible that especially the senior people who begin any China-based project with your company are committed to being involved for the duration. Also, budget the negotiation phase of business as a separate cost, and be prepared to walk away if the deal in China is not entirely to your liking. However, also be prepared to offer creative incentives which cater to known Chinese priorities before giving up if a straight U.S.-style terms and conditions approach doesn't give you the results you want. We've now reached the end of the seminar portion of the video. Everyone involved in this production hopes you found it useful and worthwhile. Let's review and briefly emphasize some of the points we've covered in Part 2. We've stressed the need for American business people and professionals to try to understand the uniquely Chinese perspective on national, regional, and organizational goals, values, and priorities. Meeting the real-world needs of your Chinese counterparts and enabling them to meet yours is as much a matter of creativity as it is a matter of information or technique. Understanding Chinese negotiation strategies and perspectives and examining their possibly very different motives and agendas can help you avoid wasting large amounts of time, money, and energy.